Hello, everybody. It is Donna Cravata again here with another Real 50 Over 50 interview. And today we have Pamela Thompson. She's an internationally recognized leader and best-selling author dedicated to empowering women to navigate life's transitions with confidence and clarity. Using her unique Art of Change framework, Pamela helps mission-driven women embrace change, unlock new possibilities, and resilience along the way. Pamela is the author of 3 best-selling books: Learning to Dance with Life, a guide for high-achieving women; The Exploits of Minerva, Reflections of a 60-something woman; and Truth and Contradictions, Life-Changing Experiences in Afghanistan. So we are going to find out about all of these things and how they fit together in the next 30 minutes. Hi, Pamela, and welcome.
Hi, Don, and thanks for the gracious introduction.
So, how do these things all fit together? I'm so curious. Where do we begin?
Where do we begin? Do you want me to start, or do you want to ask me something?
Yeah, no, just what I'm really curious about is Minerva, because she seems to be a common thread.
Yeah, Minerva is, yes, she is a muse. She's partly autobiographical. She's
Mhm.
playful. She's sensitive. She is a muse who came to me, Donna, about 30 years ago when I was riding on a bike trail in Ottawa, where I used to live. And I pushed her down. I said, I don't have time to write about you right now. And then she came back, I'm going to say in 2021, and said, write about me now. And it's very interesting because the name came to me and I'm not sure why, but I knew it was Minerva. And then I researched who Minerva was, like the Roman or the goddess, right? And she often appears with a wise owl. And she's about wisdom, and she has a number of the characteristics that I have. And plus, this is a bit ooey, off the mark here.
Mhm.
A bunch of years ago, when I was lying on a yoga mat ready to start a class, I got a message that an owl, that an owl had landed on my shoulder and was there to help support me on the next leg of my journey.
Mm.
And so to research Minerva, this goddess, and find out that she's often depicted with this owl, I thought, well, isn't that interesting? So yes, that's who she is. She's partly me, and she's partly this muse who came to me.
Mhm.
And the thing about writing through a muse or writing through somebody like this, it is incredibly liberating. So it's creative nonfiction, right? Because you're changing your name up, you're changing other people's names up you're talking about. And it is incredibly liberating because
Mm.
people don't really know what's you and what's Minerva, right? So I
And it
found
doesn't really matter.
it doesn't really matter.
No,
No.
no. So now she came forward in your second book, right?
She did. That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And then in the third book, is she involved in that book as well?
Yes. In my book, Truths and Contradictions, Life-Changing Experiences in Afghanistan, I decided to write through her again.
Mhm.
Um, I I lived and worked in Afghanistan for 13 months from October 2010 till November 2011. Then I
Mhm.
was back in 2015 and I did some technical backstopping in between. Anyway, what happened is I chose to interview, as part of this book, colleagues and friends, Afghan friends and colleagues and their friends, about their life experiences growing up in Afghanistan and what it was like to be there during key historic events like the Russian invasion and the Taliban takeovers. Anyway, so back to Minerva. So I knew I had to change their names up to protect their identities and preserve their anonymity. So I thought, why not write through Minerva?
Mhm.
And so that's what I chose to do with that one as well. And again, I think it worked well. I've had very positive comments on the book to date. And yes, it's been really fun. And the interesting sidebar to that is I had no idea what creative nonfiction was. I was talking to
Mhm.
the publications coordinator who with the publisher that helped publish my second book. And I said to her, you know, I'm not really clear what the genre is. And I'm talking to her and she said, Pam, I think it's creative nonfiction. And I got off the phone and I Googled it. And I'm like, well, who do you know? What do you know? What's creative nonfiction?
I love it. I absolutely love it, and I love how you're able to tell these stories that are, probably are not shared very widely because of some type of fear of retribution, and that you're able to change their identities and change your identity to be able to share stories about, how people are dealing with day-to-day uncertainty and unsafe and being in an unsafe environment, and how the landscape of what they're used to living in is changing around them, kind of like what we're experiencing today.
True. Yes.
So, and it is also very relevant to women our age who are changing the way that they want to work and want to live because they're coming up on that act 3, and there's no messing around at this point, right?
That is so true, Donna. It's like we don't know how much longer we're here. So make each
Yeah.
day count. Seize the day, as they say, carpe diem, right?
Yeah. So how do you see this all playing out in your interactions as you're doing the work that you do in the world, and how you work with people and guide people and relationships? And I mean, I this could go the gamut of, personal to professional and everything in between.
Okay. Well, I think I'll start maybe at the beginning because my first book, Learning to Dance with Life: A Guide for High Achieving Women, that came out of me burning out
Mhm.
at the end of 2012. And I'll just share a story, if I may. I
Yes.
had come back from Afghanistan thinking I would take some time because 13 months in a war zone is quite something. And it was high level work. I helped the Ministry of Public Health develop their first strategic plan and built the capacity of internal teams to do planning. So full on work, very satisfying, but very intense. So I got home, and within 2 weeks of getting back home, I got a call from the VP of an international organization who I'd interviewed as part of another strategic planning process before I went to Afghanistan. And she said, Pam, we have this position. And I said, I don't want a position. I've got a business, right? I'll do a contract. So anyway, I ended up throwing my hat into the ring, saying yes. And within 6 weeks, I was off. And I became a senior health advisor on 7 projects in Asia and Africa to reduce infant and maternal mortality. So it was
Oh,
like a big thing. And the thing is, so I was off to Ghana. I was off to Mali for project startup, working in French for the first time in 15 years to add to this level of, you know, challenge, I guess you would say. And anyway, you know about scope creep. I'm sure you've worked as a consultant
yeah.
for
Yeah.
many years. What
Just a
happened
little
was,
bit.
yeah, and originally it was 5. I was senior technical advisor for 5 countries. Then it morphed, oh, you speak Spanish, we'll give you Bolivia. Oh, there's only one more, Tanzania, we'll give you Tanzania. So Ethiopia, Tanzania, Ghana, Mali, these kind of places, a lot of them I had never worked in. So,
Mhm.
it was new territory in terms of their
Right.
health systems. Anyway, so going back, and
And
so
none of that comes with a defined SOP.
no, and then what happened is I was supposed to be a member of a technical working group. Then I was in the field, and the director I was working with said, "Oh, Pam, by the way, you're chairing that technical working group." And I'm like, "Oh, really?
Mhm.
Oh, don't worry about it." That was like a full-time job, right?
Mm.
Anyway, so it crept, and after about 6 weeks, I started to lose my passion, as we do when we start to burn out, right? And I'd been very passionate and felt so aligned with our mission, vision, values up to that point. And then in December, they asked me to renew the contract and just chair the technical working group on a part-time basis for 6 months. And I almost signed, and then I asked to sleep on the decision. And I
Mhm.
awoke, and I felt just like a lemon that had been squeezed dry. And I knew in that moment I had to say no.
Yeah.
And I had to take a break. I was exhausted. So I got back to the VP and the director, and I said, thanks very much for the opportunity, but I'm going to turn it down. And they were shocked. And they said, why? And I said, because I want to create more balance in my life in 2013.
Mhm.
At that time, I had no idea what that meant or what that was gonna look like, but I'm like, I knew that it just came out of my mouth, right? So I started 2013, reconnecting with family and friends, sleeping 10, 12, 13 hours a night, and still really tired, spending time in nature. I studied mindfulness with Jack Cornfield and
Mhm.
started to integrate mindfulness practices into my life. And then about 5 months in, I've been wanting to write a book for years, and I used to be people used to pay me money to research and write program and policy documents in the health field, but this was something different. I wanted to write some stuff that was really accessible. So I listened to Christine Closers. She used to have a
Mhm.
transformational author experience,
Yeah.
like 20 some, people, uh, experts,
She was a client of mine years ago.
Oh, really? Interesting. Anyway, so, and I came out of that, and it was like these puzzle pieces of my life came together. And then I got given, I would say, the 7 keys to what I call creative living, 7
Mhm.
keys to consciously cultivating improved health, happiness, fulfillment, and inner peace in your life. And so then I wrote the book. Um, Learning to Dance with Life, a guide for high achieving women, that has those 7 keys and then has the strategies associated with them. So one is like listen to and trust in your body's wisdom, right? Exercises to get out of your head and into your body. That and the other thing I did, Donna, is I interviewed high achieving women from 3 continents because
Mm.
I had done a brain dump of the attributes of high achieving women, and I wanted to validate them. So I did in-depth interviews. And in the beginning of my book, there are 19 attributes, and people don't need to have them all, but many of them have 5. And they're things like giving more than receiving, doing more than being, perfectionistic tendencies, passionate about their work, um, able to do more than the average bear. I don't say it like that in a day. But yeah, so yes, so that was really fun. And then what happened is at the same time when I was writing that book, I launched a virtual group coaching program called Staying Healthy in Body, Mind, and Spirit While Living Your Passion. And there were women from the UK, Eastern Canada, and Western Canada. And that group and kept going for like 3.5 years after it officially finished because the
Oh,
women were so bonded, even though it was all virtual, right? And so those many of the exercises and coaching questions that I asked and are woven through the book, and then there's also a workbook that accompanies that.
mhm.
That Learning to Dance with Life, a guide for high achieving women. In addition to the group coaching, I then started to do one-on-one coaching with high achieving women based on the 7 keys.
Yeah. And, like, how did that morph into book 2 and 3 and Minerva and
Great question. So what happened is I ended up pulling one of the keys out of the 7 keys out of my first book, and it's called Learn from and Embrace Life Transitions. Because what I found in working with people and also in my own life, when we resist change, it has negative impacts on our bodies, our minds, our relationships, and our bottom lines, or whoever else's bottom line we're working with, right? And so it's very important to learn to embrace change. So how do you do it? So what I did is I created a 5-step art of change process based on the metaphor life is a dance and underpinned by the belief that embracing change is a creative process that opens us up to new possibilities. And so then I began coaching people with that, having retreats, doing webinars, one-on-one coaching women. And through that process, it takes them. Do you want me to describe that process at
Yes,
this point?
yes, yes,
Okay, so
please.
my Art of Change framework is really for anybody, but I've niched down in the last few years to really focus on mission-driven women at a crossroads. And so what happens is the first one is shine your light. And it's really where you rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10 in terms of how you typically respond to change. 1 being scares me to death. 10 being I thrive on it. So Donna, may I put you on the spot right now and ask you that
Absolutely.
question?
Yeah.
Okay, so Typically, how do you respond to change on this scale of 1 to 10? 1 being scared me to death, 10 being I thrive on it.
I thrive on it.
Very typical. So you'd rate yourself a 10?
Yes.
See, many leaders I find would say that, a 9 or a 10. And then the next question is, how would you rate yourself on that same scale when a change comes out of the blue? It's something that you didn't initiate or you didn't know was coming. How would you rate yourself then?
Oh, a 10. This entire project is that.
Interesting. Well, you know, there's very few women who have said that, although there have been several. Most of the women I've interviewed or worked with have said they go down to a 5 or a 6 when it comes out of the blue.
I
But
wait for that.
there you go. Anyway, so yeah, so that's the first. So yeah, so and then that choose your dance. This works best if you just choose one transition, because a lot of times people have more than one going on, like they're moving, they're changing jobs, they're getting divorced, whatever. There's
Mhm.
all sorts of things going on. So that you choose one and then you work through that. And then it is so choose your dance, feel the rhythm, and learn the steps. So that then there's a 3-step process. And I draw heavily on the work of William Bridges. Do you know him?
Mhm.
And yeah, and so he talks about, regardless of the transition you go through, there are 3 phases: an ending, a neutral zone, and a new beginning. And in the ending, you have to let go. And I've added and modified his framework. But it's like letting go. Like if you choose to, when you choose to launch your own business, which we both have a few times,
Yeah.
you know, and you leave a real job, it's like you have to let go. You may have to let go of the, you know, the feeling of job security. I don't think anybody really has it anymore, but you feel like you've got that job security and the benefit.
Perceived.
Let go of the status you may have had in that organization, the name, and now you're launching out on your own. Maybe you have a company credit card. Anyway, all these things you need to identify and let go of them. And then I've added identify lessons learned. What have you learned from that
Mhm.
process? You might have learned what your core values are and how they weren't in alignment with the organization you were part of. And you might have thought, oh, great, you read the job description, I'm a perfect fit. And then when you started to identify your top 5 core values, you realized, oh my goodness, this is a really competitive environment and I'm all about collaboration. No wonder I don't fit here. Do you know, all these ahas and stuff. So what did you learn from that, for example, that position that you had, the work that you were doing? And then you've taken the leap. And then this is the creative space, but it's really scary,
Mhm.
because that's when you get to then imagine that new business of your dreams, career of your dreams, relationship, whatever it is, life of your dreams. And yet many people fear this because it's the unknown. Okay, people like you and me probably not as much, but there's still fear, because we're physiologically hardwired to
Yeah.
fear stuff, that we around uncertainty, right?
Yep.
That amygdala is scanning our environment, saying, "Oh, is that a threat? Okay, then I need to send these stress hormones out,"
Mhm.
and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, run from the bear.
Exactly. Anyway, so yes, so giving people tools to do that, and along the way also integrating what I call body-centered coaching, which I studied, and that was really helpful to help me to get out of my head and into my body. And then the next phase is to take action. So create a plan and take action toward what you've envisioned in that phase of the new beginnings. So very exciting. And, so feel the rhythm and learn the steps, practice, 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 and then consciously share your dance with the world. Because when you go through change, in a positive way, and you embrace it rather than resist it, you serve as a positive role model for others in your environment,
Yeah.
in your family, in your community, in your workplace, in your business, whatever,
Yeah,
right?
you become evidence.
Exactly, exactly. So it's really fun, and it kind of the art of change framework. It kind of turns change on its head,
Mhm.
because you kind of play with the experience rather than saying, "Oh my goodness, what am I going to do now?" Right?
I love it. I absolutely love it. It's very much in alignment with the way that I work with clients, basically with their content. I used to call it a content audit, but now I call it tried and new, because I
Ah,
take them through what they already have.
Cool.
And it helps, particularly at this age, it helps you kind of self-validate that, like, we're not reinventing, we're not starting over. We're kind of, we're not burning down the ships, we're calling in the fleet, and we're picking and choosing what we want to take with us as we move into what's next.
Love that.
Yeah, I love it. I love when I see people doing like similar stuff. It just gets me excited. So now how did this morph into Minerva? Because I'm sure it's built into
Oh,
it
yes.
pretty deeply.
Yeah, what happened is, yeah, I started to go there and then I took us down another pathway. Um, so what I realized in working with women is that a lot of women feel that they're alone on this journey.
Yeah.
And so I felt it would be really helpful to write a book where that, as I say, that took that one key, learn from, advice, and embrace life transitions out. And
Mhm.
so I interviewed friends and friends of friends about their various life transitions, losing the love of your life, finding the love of your life, separation, divorce, burnout, a number of things, right? And I created composite characters. So
Mhm.
3 interviews could be one person,
Mhm.
right? And so no one would really know. And then I was Minerva. So I'm integrated too because I've had a number of separation, divorce, burnout. I've experienced a number of them, but I wanted to shine the light on the experiences of others. And that book is about 6 women who've been part of a women's circle for over 2 decades, supporting each other through a variety of life transitions. I have been in a women's circle now for about 6 years. At the time of writing that book, which was launched December of 2022, I'd been in for a few years, so not that long. So I know what a women's circle is like. And in our women's circles, we integrate experiential exercises.
Mhm.
So I thought, okay, great. In one of the chapters, they'll be in the women's circle, and I'll introduce my Art of Change framework. So in the book, I was able to weave that in as well as part of the process. So yes, it was really fun to do it, and it flowed very easily. And I am one of these people, I think they call them pantsers and ponsers. I might have, anyway, 2 ways that people write. And one
Mhm.
is by the seat of their pants, and others are, the outline at the beginning. I'm one of the seat of the pants ones. I sit down, I'm like, okay, what transition am I going to write about today? And it just flows, right? To a certain point, and then I have to organize it, right? Because otherwise I'll be
Yeah, but
writing.
you can't organize it before you write it.
Anyway, so that's a sort of a sidebar, but anyway, that's how that came to be. And yeah, it just made sense that because I was going to create these co to create these other characters that I also changed my own name.
And how did this manifest into book 3?
Well, that's interesting because I had launched this coaching business in 2009. And I had a small network of coaches in Canada and the States, and we're coaching people through a variety of life transitions, men and women. And it wasn't really, I was really feeling, it was one-on-one. We weren't doing group coaching. And I was really restless and feeling I want more impact faster. And our ROI, the return on investment, wasn't as great as I thought. And and I was really missing the international work that I'd been doing, right?
Mhm.
And so I was taking this body-centered coaching course, and it was the last class. It was by teleseminar. And the facilitator coach asked for someone to demo the experience. No one was putting up their hands. So I said, okay, I'll do it. So he said, find a line on the floor. Think about something that you really, really want. Now, notice any negative emotions or fears that come up for you, and imagine each one of those as a rock in the knapsack on your back. Feel how heavy they are. Now release them and let them go and cross that line however you wish. You may walk across it, run across it, leap across it, and say aloud what you want. So I leapt across the line and I said, I want to play big. Within 2 weeks, Donna, no word of a lie, I got an email offering me to throw my hand into the ring for one of 3 positions in Afghanistan, and one of them had my name written on it. It
Oh,
was
wow.
Senior Technical Advisor, Strategic Planning and Performance Measurement. I used to do that. I was a management consultant and global health person. And so I'm like, I had been wanting to work in Afghanistan with women for a number of years, but because of the volatility, I didn't. This opportunity came up and I thought, I'm meant to do this. So I talked to my partner and he was totally okay with it. And this meant going to live and work in a war zone. Initially, it was 9 months and then it got increased to 13. And that's so this happens. Within a week, I throw my hat into the ring. Within 2 weeks, I'm part of the interview process. So this all started with this jumping across the line, and like something like the 10th of August. By the middle of October, I was on the ground in Afghanistan, having signed this contract. I mean, it happened that fast. And listen to and trust in your body's wisdom is what I always do when I make decisions. So that's kind of how that one of those keys came forward and this opportunity presented itself.
Mm.
And then I got to live and work in a war zone, which a lot of people would have thought was pretty scary. But you know what? I was so excited about the opportunity. And it was something that I really felt I could make a difference doing, which I did feel I did at the time. Within 9 months, using participatory processes with my team and the members of the Ministry of Public Health, which is the Ministry of Health for the country, 74 department ministry, we co-created the strategic plan for 5 years for the country and redid all their operational planning processes and their templates so that they would integrate with the strategy.
Amazing.
So
That's amazing. And then, so the book is containing the stories of that experience.
yeah, the front end of the book is the scary stories and the funny stories, because there were funny things that happened based on my experiences living and working in Kabul. And the second part is based on those interviews that I did with colleagues and friends in 2024. So I interviewed them virtually and to learn more. But my why in writing the book, Donna, was really to dispel myths about Afghanistan and Islam, because there are many of them, right? And also to shine the light on the incredible courage and resilience of the Afghan peoples.
Mm.
They've been through so much for
Yeah.
such a long time. And now the women, oh my goodness. And so the latter part of the book identifies how at different levels and to the individual level, can we support women and girls in Afghanistan now? And then how can we build peace and understanding in the world? Because Lord knows we need that. Because that's my bigger mission, to help build peace and understanding in the world.
I think that just needs a moment.
Yeah, it's not a big one, you know? Go big or go home. That's what I say.
That's amazing. I absolutely love it. I love what you're doing. I love the way you share it too, and the clarity you have in what you do, who it's for, the impact it makes, how the parts come together. That I think that the way that this conversation has unfolded will be so helpful to many people, because I think we just gather so many things and experiences. We don't know how to work our way through it, and turn it into something that will serve, that will be in service to others and ourselves. And you've done such a masterful job of pulling together a life and a body of work, and you're just getting started.
Well, thank you, Donna. Appreciate those thoughts and those comments.
Yeah, I mean, that's just absolutely lovely. Well, I cannot believe we're almost at 30 minutes already. Is there anything else that we missed that you want to share? We just kind of went off.
Yeah, my book, Truths and Contradictions, Life-Changing Experiences in Afghanistan, this is more than a book about me. I am donating a portion of the proceeds to a group called Right to Learn Afghanistan. They're a Canadian, but really global. They started in Canada. They're a national nonprofit, and they've been working with women and girls education for 18 years in Afghanistan, and they're still providing distance ed. So, and I really, they're a group that's very dear to my heart. And the other thing is, if you read the book, and I would welcome an honest review on Amazon or Goodreads, because I want to keep the book on the bestseller list so that the message will spread. Because, as I say, it's much bigger than me and the people I'm writing about. It's really looking at ultimately, how can we help build peace and understanding in the world? Because there is a chapter in it on truth, called Truths and Contradictions, where I basically share different myths and the other part of the myths, and I leave it to the reader to make a decision. But it's like things like, if I may, education of women and girls. You would think, based on what's happening in Afghanistan now, that the Quran would say that we're not supposed to educate women and girls. In fact, it does not say that. It says that education is meant for everyone and it's meant to be valued and cherished.
Mm.
Guess what? Mohammed's wife was a businesswoman.
Mm. It's important work. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So here is Pamela's website. Go buy the book. I'm buying it today. And,
Thank you.
um, and and support what she's doing and look what she's doing, because it's important on so many levels. I mean, it's important on showing how you put together all of the things that you've done into something cohesive and understandable and that speaks to the right people. And then, the mission behind the work is so incredibly important because you're leaving a legacy and you're changing systems in places where that's not easy to do.
Well, thank you, Donna, for recognizing that and for acknowledging that work.
Well, I can't say enough good things. If you are watching on the replay, please ask questions, comment, ideas, comments about the book, and tag us so we'll come back and keep this important conversation going. Connect with Pamela on her website, and come back next week because we've got more. We've got interviews booked months in advance and lots of new things coming too. I've been busy recreating here, so I'll be sharing some stuff soon. And thank you, Pamela. This has been a great and enlightening conversation.
Well, thank you, Donna. I really enjoyed the opportunity and appreciated the experience
Okay.
as well.
We will be back.